Hello everyone, welcome back to Think Outside the Board for another edition of the Kickstarter Weekly. Today's video would normally have covered campaigns that are funding between March 21st and March 27th, but I have no campaigns that I'm going to talk to you about today. So I'm shooting this on a Tuesday morning. It is March 22nd. I am planning on editing and posting this video tonight. If I hit some delays, it'll go up tomorrow morning, Wednesday the 23rd. I think that's enough in advance to tell you about the two games that I'm not even going to cover that will be completing their funding on the 24th. But I do want to get these videos out more timely and on a normal schedule where they're coming out on a Friday. Maybe if I'm really busy on a Saturday for the following week. So there will be another Kickstarter Weekly coming very soon in just a few days. And that video may have up to 10 different campaigns that will all be funding next week. So I want to make sure that that gets to you guys early enough so that you have a chance to look at it and consider everything that's on there before we get into next week when those games are all funding and you need to make a decision if you're going to fund some of them. So while it's going to be a very light week on the currently running Kickstarter section, it's going to be a very heavy week on played games. I took a trip out of town with my fiance Kristen last week for my birthday. We got to play a bunch of lighter games. I also had a game day in there with some heavier games. So I have 10 different games to talk to you about today that I've played. Actually 8 games and 2 expansions. So let's just get right to that. So first on the list is Beyond the Sun. This is a medium-heavy kind of a game. It is space-themed. It's got tracks that players are kind of going up. So they need to unlock these tracks that will give them some improved abilities as well as some additional worker placement spaces. And as they unlock certain abilities, they can then unlock the abilities after those. They're also competing to complete some goals. And the goals are kind of minimal because you don't get to score that many. I think in a 3-player game, as soon as 3 goals were scored total, it triggers the end of the game. So it's very, very lucky if a player is able to score multiple goals, I think, in a game of Beyond the Sun, at least at the 3-player count. It can happen, and it may kind of happen after the end game trigger, but you're probably going to be getting 1 goal and then maybe squeaking out another 1, maybe 2 if you're really, really lucky and on top of things, and kind of getting those goals so that they're going to score simultaneously and doing that before any other players have really scored any goals themselves. Now, the game isn't really too much to look at. It's just got these cards on a board, but I really, really like the gameplay. I found it very compelling. I thought it had a good amount of crunch in a shorter amount of time for a game like this. And I think there's a lot of variability baked in this game too. The way cards come out, the way you kind of set them up at the beginning of the game, and the way different things kind of chain into other things. There's a lot of content, I think, in the way that you can mix things up with different variability to give the game a really long life, a long, enjoyable life. And I'm really enjoying the gameplay for what it is. I know that they're also planning on doing an expansion, and that's going to include a solo mode. And I can tell that this is the kind of game that I'm going to really enjoy playing the solo mode in. So for me right now, Beyond the Sun is a really solid game, and I'm giving it an 8.0 rating for the time being. Now, I've played another game called Canvas. I played this one a couple times. This is a very, very light game. It's very, very pretty, and it has players selecting cards that have different art on them and different icons and putting them in sleeves. And you're essentially doing a set collection game where you're trying to collect different icons or maybe have them in different orders or next to each other, different relationships. It's a very short game. It's very easy to teach. It's easy to play. You only have 12 to 14 turns. You're just going to be either selecting cards or making a painting on your turn. And the way you're doing this depends on the kind of goal cards that come out and the medals that you're going to be awarded for doing different things. And then as you get a little bit later into the game and you're working on your second and your third painting or sleeved card, you're going to want to try to target medals that you already have to get them in certain multipliers to score the most points. Now, the game is so pretty. It is a gorgeous game to look at, and the components are really, really solid. There's a Kickstarter version where you get some wooden tokens, but honestly, the cardboard tokens that come with it are thick and they're really pretty and nice. I think either version, it's going to just be enjoyable to play and look at and pleasurable and tactile in a tactile way. So you don't really need those wooden Kickstarter components, I think, to have a good time with the game. There is solo play as well. There are certain goals and certain scenarios, and you can play it solo and try to hit certain scores. And I think that is something that I may do before I sell the game. And the reason is that my fiance really did not like this game at all. It is so simple and so easy to teach and to play that there doesn't really feel like there's much player choice or much agency in your choices. It works on a similar system to many card drafting games where if you want to take a card that's a little farther into the market row, you need to put, usually it's money, coins on the cards. In this case, it's inspiration tokens. And there's no purpose for those in the game beyond taking cards. So if you take a bunch of cards that are further in and you spend all your inspiration tokens, you'll get to a point in the game where you have to take the first cards. Hopefully those are loaded up with some inspiration tokens so that those can give you more choices again on future turns. But it's a very simple card drafting and set collection game. It's very pretty. It's a gorgeous game. It's very popular right now. People are loving it, I think, because it is so pretty and it's so easy to play. But I just don't feel that the choices are there. I don't feel like there is much game to the gameplay. And I just can't justify keeping it. I'm never going to pull it out and play it. Because any of my gamer friends, it's going to be, even though it's pretty, it's going to be way too light for them. They're just not going to be interested in it. And because it is so kind of easy to play and quick to teach, quick to get to the table, there's components, there's a lot of metals that you need to put out and you need to set up the cards. None of that's difficult, but it actually takes, I don't know, half the time it takes to play the game just because the game plays so fast. Most of the time, I think when you're playing the game, your turns are going to be very quick, but because you're going to know what card you want. And then if you're like me and you get maybe 5 cards, then you may have some choices on the turn when you're assembling the cards to really kind of crunch out what you can score with the cards that you have, because you can only put 3 cards in each painting. So there may be a little bit of AP there during that decision, but that's just 3 times when you're putting together the cards. I think for all of the drafting turns, they're going to be really, really fast. So it's a really pretty game to look at. I just don't think that the gameplay is there. For me, I'm going to give this game a 6.0. It's really on the line. 6.0 for me is something that if other players are really excited to play it, I can play it. I can have a fun time playing it. With this game, I think the iconography is all really well done. The colors in the game are just vibrant. The art is pretty to look at, and it's a very pleasing game to play. But beyond that, there isn't that much to it. So I can play it with people and have a good time, but it's never going to be something that I'm going to suggest. And my fiance actively dislikes it. For some reason, that process of putting the paintings together, it gives her a lot of anxiety, which is not what you want in a simple, light, fun, colorful, pretty game like this. So she and I are never going to play it, probably. She's never going to want to play it. And it's just not a game that I'm going to bring out for my heavier gamer friends. And because it does take a while to kind of get the components out, with lighter gamer friends, I don't know that I'd pull that out either. I might, but I don't have too many of those. And I'll probably go for something that I think has some more compelling choices. So it just didn't really hit the mark for me. I know a lot of people had it on their top 10 lists of 2020. I'm gearing up towards doing that later in this year, but this will not make that. This is going to be very, very far down on my list. I think actually Canvas itself was a 2019 game, and the sequel, Reflections, is a 2022 game, I believe. So maybe the original base game won't make it onto one of my lists. And I think Reflections won't either, just because that's going to be so far down the list. Now, Reflections, the expansion, I did play that as well. So that's kind of the third game on my list, Canvas Reflections. Even though it's an expansion, I played that one once. That adds a few things into the game. It adds a board, whereas in the original game, all you have is a cloth mat. and it gives you more space. It adds a new kind of medal in, some gold medals. Those are worth 3 points per gold medal. They're similar to the silver medals in the base game that are worth 2 points. Those are things that you can just score to infinity if you get a lot of things that score gold medals. And that was the reason that in one game I got 65 points. 30 of those points were from gold medals. I just scored a lot on the gold medals. You're going to have 2 different card markets on the board. So if you play in the base game, you sort of have 1 card market. If you play in Reflections, the expansion, you have 2 card markets. They fill out independently of each other, and that just gives you more choices, things that you can pick from. Gives you 2 different rows to choose from. And there are also some different sort of iconography and ways to score in Reflections. There is a double card that will sometimes double the icons next to it. More importantly, there is the mirror ability, which allows you to flip a card to the other side. You'll still have the same art, but reversed, and the symbols will be reversed on the colors that they appear on. They may be switched around, they may be in the same colors, but everything kind of reverses itself. So it gives you more options with those cards. And I think for Kristen, that sort of increased the anxiety factor of the choices that she had when she actually went to make that painting. And I think for her, for kind of a light, easy, breezy game like this, she just didn't want to have the whole game be easy breezy and then these moments of kind of severe crunch. There's only 2 or 3 of them probably in the game, depending on, you know, you're making a painting and what you're looking at to put that together, but it just didn't fit for her with the rest of the game. And I think for me, I like Reflections as an expansion. I'm going to rate Canvas, I think, a 6.0, and then the expansion a 6.5, so it makes it a little bit better. It gives you some more variability for the solo games, so there's more solo stuff that you can do, more scenarios, more combinations of gold cards, and just more gold cards if you're doing it randomly to mix things up. But again, the gameplay, even with the new stuff, it is just simple. If you really like this game, if you want a light family game, very quick to play, maybe you played a bunch of times in a row, it is a game that pretty much anyone can engage in. And so I think maybe it's becoming successful with family gamers and gamers that just want something really light and quick. And it is pretty. God, it is pretty. It's a gorgeous game. I just think for me, I wanted more from the gameplay, and I didn't think that the gameplay measured up to the component level and the graphic design level, the art level, and how gorgeous it is. I think for me, if I want to play a game with really pretty art that's very simple, I'm going to go more for Dixit. And if I want a painting game, I'll probably go for Kanagawa or even Bob Ross Art of Chill. Those are both pretty solid painting games. I think the Bob Ross game was actually one of the very first games that Prospero Hall worked on. And I'm going to be talking to you about Prospero Hall next video because they have a Kickstarter campaign that is alive. It is their first game. It's a legacy game based on Jurassic Park. I think I'm talking about that next video, but whatever week that's funding, I will be talking about it because that game looks pretty cool. But the Bob Ross Art of Chill game was one of their first games. Now, those were both Kickstarter games. I got them together because I didn't get Canvas the first time around, so I backed Reflections, and I obviously got the base game with it. I do think that I'm probably going to fiddle around with the solo mode a little bit, just play it for fun, play some of the different scenarios, and then I'm probably going to be selling both of those games off very quickly. So I got another Kickstarter game in that I played while I was on this trip. It is Keyper Europe. It is a 2-player head-to-head game. It involves drafting, hand management, and area control. So players are putting together teams of thieves, and they're trying to steal art from 3 different locations in a city. Now, one of the really cool things about Keyper Europe is it comes with 4 different cities, 4 different locations. So you've got a set of kind of base cards, and then you've got city-themed cards. And anytime you play, you're going to choose a city, and you're going to throw those city cards in with the base cards, and that'll give you some more variability. Now, the locations themselves, you're only going to get 3 of those in a game, so it's very possible that even when you're playing with specific city cards, you may not get the city cards for those locations. You still might get 3 generic locations. But definitely the city themed cards that have to do with the gear and the thieves themselves, those will make an appearance because you see a lot of those cards in a game. Now, this is a 2-player only game. I knew going in that my fiance Kristen was not going to like this because it's very contentious. It reminds me of like a war game like Fort Sumter or Blitzkrieg, where you've got sort of 5 different areas of war and you're doing a tug of war battle in each location for area control of those locations. It's the same concept here. You're doing a tug of war in 3 different locations. There are some other ways to score points as well. If you get goods that you can steal, those will score points. They'll also score kind of a set collection of points if you get different ones. And then you're going to have city bonuses as well. So any of the 4 cities that you're playing in, they're going to have additional scoring rules for those 4 cities. I really like this game. It is a very small game in a small box. It is easy to teach. It's easy to play. But it has really good choices for a game like this. Unlike something like Canvas, where I think like it really just kind of plays itself. It's pretty to look at, but there aren't really choices to be made, except in those moments where you're putting together the paintings, but sometimes not even then. Sometimes if you've chosen cards well, the paintings kind of are obvious. They create themselves. But this game, despite being small, has really nice components. It has a really nice insert. There's kind of a suede insert, and then there's cards that go on those, and then a plastic insert on top of that. There's some sort of premium components, like a round marker that's gold-plated, some nice kind of cool-looking little area control markers. They kind of fit together in the insert, and all the cards are very, very nice. So the component quality in the game is great, and there's a lot of variability, I think, baked into this small package. So this is a game for me. I definitely will keep this game in my collection. I'm going to rate this one a 7.5, and just know that that is because I tend to not like such lighter games and quick games. I like meatier, heavier games. And so I think that probably dings the game down a little bit for me. But I still love it for what it is. I plan on keeping it for a very long time. I want to introduce it to a lot of people. And it's a great filler game for someone like me. You can play it in 20 or 30 minutes. And it's such a good game, and it's good enough choices that it still feels like you got a really good game experience out of it. So I'm rating it a 7.5 just because I tend to like some meatier games. If you like this kind of game, you're going to go much higher, like 8.5, 9.5, I think somewhere in there. It is a really good game. I know that it is sort of a redesign of another game called Keyper that was a multiplayer game. This is streamlined just for 2 players. I like some of what I've heard about the original Keyper, and I think it's a little more open in some of the things that you can do. And I'd like to play that game to compare the 2. But I can only speak to this game, and I can say for what it is so well designed. It's a tight little game, and it's really, really good. So 7.5 for me. Once I play it with more people and experience more of the cities, I only played 1 game, keep in mind. And I played it with someone that wasn't going to like it. I knew she wasn't going to like it. She was a good sport. I mean, she played it with me, and it's not like she grumbled through it. We had a good time. It's just not her game, and she doesn't want to play it again. So when I play it against more people who may like it a lot more, and I see some of the different city cards and the way that those cities score, it's very possible this game may go up another half a point or a point. I think it's probably likely. So it's a 7.5 for me for now, but expect to hear about this game again in future videos, and I think it's likely that that score will go up more. Okay, I have another game that I played both the base game and the expansion, and that is Cat Lady. This is a very light game, and I really like it. This is something I'm keeping in my collection because if I want to play a light game, I can pull this out. It plays so fast. It's so easy to teach. And I think there's just enough scoring possibilities in the game that it keeps it feels like you have choices to make. So the basic mechanic that's going on here is there's a grid of 9 cards. There's a cat token. And when you take your turn, you're going to place that cat token next to a row or a column and then take all 3 of those cards. And then the next player cannot take whatever you just took, that same row or column. So it keeps the cards coming out and refreshing and keeping the grid fresh. So they just need to go to a different column or a different row and take those 3 cards. Now, you're getting cats that you put in your tableau. Each cat needs different kinds of food and different amounts to be fed. So some of the cards that you'll be getting are food cards, tuna, milk, and chicken legs. And you can put those on your cats, and so they'll be fed, and you'll be able to score those cats at the end of the game. The game will end when you can no longer fully refill a column or a row. So it's very, very, very simple game. There are some other cards in there as well. There are 5 different kinds of toys, and you score set collection on the toys. So, it's like if you have 5 different toys, I think you score 18 or 21 points. And if you have one kind of a toy, you're going to score 1 point. And then the more toys you have, the more it goes up. It's like, 2, 5, 12, whatever the multiplier is, but it kind of jumps up. And then the max for having all 5 toys is either 18 or 21 points. There's a couple other cards in the game too. There are these costumes. And if you don't have any costumes, you're going to lose 2 points. So you want to get at least 1 costume during your play. And then whatever player has the most costumes will score 6 points. There's also catnip. If you take a catnip in your hand and you only have 1, you're going to lose 2 points. If you get 2 to 3 catnips, you're going to score an additional point for every cat that you have fully fed in your tableau. And I think if you get 4 catnip cards, you're going to score 2 points for every cat that you have fed. At the end of the game, if you have any unfed cats, they're going to lose you 2 points. Fed cats will score you the amount on the card, and that usually is determined by the amount of food. So the cats that require more food generally score you more points. But cats normally will score 2 to 6 points, depending on the cat. And then whoever has the most leftover food of all the players will lose 2 points as well. So there are just a bunch of little scoring mechanisms, and it's just enough to give you really good choices, I think, as a player. And I really like Cat Lady. Again, this is a light game for me, though, so this isn't something that I probably would suggest on my own. So my score is kind of on the lower side. It's a 6.5 for Cat Lady. I'm going to give the expansion, which I also played, that is Cat Lady Box of Treats, a 7.0. Now there's one caveat here, and that is that I do not think that that expansion is useful or something that I would play at 2 players, which is mostly how I'm going to be playing Cat Lady. So in our 2-player game, it just added in a few cards. I think it's more trouble than it's worth to put those cards into the decks, mix them up, and then have to take them back out after you play. There is solo options in Box of Treats, though. So if you want to play a solo game, absolutely it's great for that. And then if you have more players, like 3 up, and you can play up to 6 players, you're going to have a lot more cards that go into the game that do more things. And once you're playing with 3 or more players, you're going to add in these shared goals. And the shared goals look really cool. I think for me, for my money, Box of Treats, the reason to have that is for the solo mode and for the shared goals that get used with 3 and more players. It does add in some more kind of card mechanics as well. There's a laser pointer, which thematically, if you're moving the laser pointer around, it allows you to take cards that are not in a row or a column. So you're going to choose any 3 cards in the grid that you want, keep 2, and discard 1. So you get 1 less card, although you do get to remove a card from the grid if you think it's something your opponents might want. But the key here is that you get to take any 2 cards. So even if it's in a blocked row or column, you can take it, and you can take them from all over the board. So maybe there's 2 cards in very different places of this 9-card grid that you really, really want, and this allows you to get those. Also, like the name of the game, Box of Treats. 2 of the main mechanics are treats, and when you get a treat, it looks like a little dog treat. I mean, it's a cat treat, but it's this kind of brown wooden token. That will allow you to feed any cat by itself. So you could even have a cat that needs like 4 different items of food at the end of the game, which could be hard to come by. And again, unfed cats equal -2 points at the end of the game. So the treat allows you to get the cat fed, but it will only score you 1 point. So it's not going to score, the 6 points that the cat would otherwise score, but it does take that end game scoring from a -2 to a +1. That's a 3-point difference. So the treats are good to have kind of as an oh shit button if you aren't able to get enough food by the end of the game. The other mechanic in this expansion, the main mechanic, is boxes, because we all know that cats like to go into boxes. So if you get a box card, it's going to have a specific color of cat and a specific food type that the cat likes to eat. So there are very specific cats that go in each box. But once you have a cat in a box, you then will score an additional point for that cat in the box and any other boxes that you have, even if there are no cats in them. So the example in the book shows 3 boxes, 2 with cats in it. So each of the boxes with the cat in it will score a point for all the boxes. So basically, each of those will score 3 points, and 3 times 2 is 6. The player doesn't get to score the 3rd box because there's no cat in it. So that box counts towards the other cat in the box scorings, but it doesn't do its own scoring. Something I forgot to mention, actually, that is in both the base game and in the expansion are stray cats, which are kind of goal card extra things. So the only way you get those cats, 3 of them come out at the top of the game. There are these lost card cats. If you get 2 of those lost cards, you can trade them in for 1 of the 3 stray cats. And the stray cats usually have scoring that is a multiplier for something else in the game. Again, it just adds in a little bit more variability with a different scoring option. And all those things give you, in my opinion, just enough going on to make the game feel rewarding and to give players some, choices that have agency to them. So Cat Lady is one of my favorite, very, very light games. It's very light. And I would heartily recommend it to anyone that's looking for something that light. I think it's just really good. And Josh Wood, who also designed Santa Monica, has a lot of skill at designing games this light with such good choices. Santa Monica, I think, has a little bit more going on in terms of how you score. And I guess that's probably the game that I would pull out over Cat Lady if I had my choice, just because there's a little more going on scoring-wise, but they're both such good light games. I'd recommend them to anyone. Now, I also played Final Girl a couple times, and I recently went all in on the Kickstarter. Meanwhile, a friend of mine had backed the original Kickstarter, so he let me play his copy of the game that had already been delivered. I have to say there's so much hype going on about Final Girl right now, and I did, like I said, I backed it all in. I am planning on, throughout the course of this year, getting a Twitch stream going, a Twitch channel going, and I'm going to be streaming stuff, a lot of different kinds of games, some solo stuff. I think that I will still stream Final Girl because it's going to be a really fun game to play, especially streaming, and I can go through and play all the different characters and the different films and things. But I think that once I have that experience on Twitch and kind of get my fill of it, I will eventually be selling Final Girl. From my play, which was just the base game with the camp one, Sleepy Horrors, whatever it's called, I wasn't a huge fan of Final Girl. I think the price for it has gotten so rich and over-bloated. It's a very simple game that's very, very luck-based. It doesn't really feel like you have good choices. There's not much agency in the choices that you're making. The thing that makes it fun is the theme. And there are fun choices to be had in that. When things go bad, that actually is a lot of the, I think, enjoyment of the game is the way that things go bad. But it is a hard game to win. It's not a game that you're going to be able to win even when you get better. You kind of have to have skill and luck on your side to pull off a victory, I think, in Final Girl. So it's just not really my kind of game. I think if I'm playing a solo game, I want a puzzle that I find really rewarding. There's a 2-player game called Curious Cargo, which is kind of simple in what it does, but it has such a rich, dense system of mechanics. I love that game. I don't think there's a solo mode for that one. It's a 2-player only game, but I really like the puzzle in that game. There's just not enough puzzle for me in Canvas or in Final Girl or in a game that I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this video, another solo game that's very, very well loved, that the puzzle is just not really clicking for me. All of this points me back to a game that I did not back, that I did play online, called Ratcatcher, a solo adventure game. I really liked that game. That had some really good solo choices, and the combination of theme and what you're doing in that game. I think if I was going to play a solo game out of Canvas, Final Girl, Ratcatcher, And the game that I'm going to be talking about later, which is Under Falling Skies, I think I would go for Ratcatcher. Now, I don't think Ratcatcher is going to retail, so I don't know. We'll see what happens. But if I get deeper and deeper into the world of lighter solo gaming, as I play some of these games on stream eventually and then kind of sell them from my collection, I think the game that I'm going to be coming back to wanting to acquire in some way, whether that's finding a lightly used copy, or maybe perhaps a future Kickstarter, I think it's going to be Ratcatcher. It's a really good game. But we're not talking about Ratcatcher right now. We're talking about Final Girl. So absolutely, I think the theme is there for Final Girl. It is, got this combination of luck that works for the theme. But when you go all in on a game like that and you get all these different films, it takes up quite a bit of space for a lighter game like what it is. And I just think the puzzle's not there for me. It's something I'm going to play through and enjoy and have an experience with, and then remove from my collection. It will not be something I keep around for the long term and keep coming back to. So Final Girl for me, 6.0. 6.0, as I've already said in this video, is this score that's kind of like, I can enjoy it if I must. If it comes out and I find myself playing it, I can have a good time with it, but it's nothing that I would reach for. And if you're talking about a solo game, which is the case with Final Girl or Under Falling Skies, I'm the only one playing that. So if it's not a game that I'm going to reach for first, I shouldn't have it. I would much prefer to play solo mode in like Lacerda games or different heavier Euros than a lot of these games, these kind of lighter solo games that I've been playing recently. But I did want to just say, for that genre, for that complexity level, check out Ratcatcher, man. If you're looking for a really good kind of lighter solo game, Ratcatcher's awesome. My favorite of all of these that I'm talking about. But before we get to Under Falling Skies, because I'm going in alphabetical order, let's talk about Tekhenu, Obelisk of the Sun. So that is a big, heavy game. Came out, I think, last year from Board and Dice, kind of in their T-series, like Teotihuacan. They did Tawantinsuyu. The first one I think they did was Zolkin. And there's been a couple others. Tabanusi, Builders of Ur is new. I'm going to be playing that one hopefully in the next couple months. I already have it. So it is a dice drafting game, and the area of the board that you draft dice from will determine the action that you take, as well as kind of the strength of the action. I loved it. I really, really liked it. I think I'm going 8.5 on this one. It will probably go up over time as well. And I know that there's an expansion coming out. I'm not sure if it's already out. I have it on pre-order, but I have it in with some things that may have been delayed. So it's possible it's already published and it's just waiting to come to me until something else is published, like the Port Royal Big Box. So as I play more with Tekhenu, my score may go up. I can't remember if there's a solo mode for it or not. I think there is. So, that is the kind of thing that I would really like, so as a solo mode. So I want to explore the solo mode with Tekhenu. But I really like the choices in that game. There's a lot of just different kind of mechanical systems and the way they interconnect and work together. There's a card market that you can take cards from that will, score ongoing powers, one-time things, or endgame goals. There's area control in different ways and different sections of the board. There are statues that you can build that will give you bonuses when other players take actions of the area type where you build that statue. There are just a lot of really crunchy, fun mechanisms in Tekhenu that work together really, really well. So for me, 8.5, I think as I explored the solo mode and, play the game more, expansion as well, I wouldn't be surprised if that score goes up even higher. But I think out of all the games that I played this period, that one was my favorite. Followed probably by Beyond the Sun, which is not surprising because those are the two heaviest games, I think, and I tend to favor heavier games. I also played Three Sisters, and I played this one a couple times, just like with Canvas and Final Girl. And Three Sisters is the new roll and write dice drafting game from the guys who did Fleet and Fleet the Dice game. And I really enjoy it. I'm going a 7.5 on this one. I think out of all the games that we played, that one was my fiance's favorite. She likes farming themed games, and it's rather simple, and I think the roll and write appealed to her. We both played Seven Bridges earlier in the year, which I kickstarted, and we both really disliked that game. I would warn people away from Seven Bridges. And I feel badly saying that because, it's the designer's baby, and I don't like to talk negatively about games, but my personal experience with Seven Bridges was not a good one, nor my fiance. We like Three Sisters a lot more. I also recently picked up Cartographers with the Heroes expansion, so I think we'll be taking a look at that one as well soon, and I'll have to see how she likes that. Other roll and writes that I really like are Welcome To, and I've also been wanting to try out the Railroad Inc. series. So I think Welcome To is probably the next one that I would purchase. But we'll check out Cartographers first. I've played that before. I really like that one. Back to Three Sisters. You're making kind of different choices when there's a rondel in the middle of the board, and you're going to be doing a planting or watering action in some area of your player sheet. There's kind of 6 different sections, as well as a rondel action, which might be another planting and watering action. And as you do that, you're going to be kind of building up some corn. Once you have a corn built up to a certain level, you can also build up beans that are kind of related. And there's also pumpkins. And those 3 crops are part of the Three Sisters system of farming, where those crops kind of benefit each other. So that's thematically why they've tied these together in this game. And the way the pumpkins work is they don't score any points. The corn and the beans do. But the pumpkins, when you complete a pumpkin and a pumpkin next to it, you automatically get a flower, a perennial in the middle. And then the perennials will score you all kinds of bonuses. But that's not all. There's different kinds of rondel actions. There are things that will send you to the shed, where you can take shed actions. Some of those will be endgame points. Some of those will be kind of ongoing powers to bulk other things. There's fruits that you can unlock, and fruits may do different things. They may give you goods. Goods, you want to have a lot of goods whenever you go to do a farmer's market action. That will allow you to do more things there, which may give you more fruit and more flowers. And compost. And compost is good because it will allow you to alter your dye phase. And then there's the apiary, which is kind of honey. And that's another thing that you can do. And if you go up high enough on that track actually splits. And that'll give you more fruit and flowers and endgame points. So there's a whole balance of things that you can do. And a lot of that will be determined by the die that you can draft and kind of what your opponent is doing. And there's kind of things that happen, event actions. Some of those are rains, which will water everything and grow everything that you already have planted to begin with. There's just a lot of good choices going on. Now, that said, and it being also said that I really enjoyed the game so far, and I'm giving it a 7.5. I think playing it with my fiance, I think she zeroed in on the winning strategies very quickly. So when we played our first game, she was able to do this thing where she got all of the pumpkins. She got a end game bonus for the pumpkins and was able to score all of the flowers in the middle. And she just ran away with the game. She scored well over 100 points, I think. And I did not as well. I scored like 50 points. And I saw what she did, and I was very impressed. And we played again. I tried to do that, and I didn't quite pull it off. So I actually did worse than I played the first game. But meanwhile, she improved on her strategy, and she found a few different things that kind of chained together really well. And she scored just even more points, like I think 175 points or something in our second game. Now, that seemed astronomically high to me. And so I kind of looked around a little bit, and from the limited looking I've done, I haven't seen too many other people scoring those high points at that level. Now, I don't think she was cheating or anything like that. I think she just stumbled on what may be the winning strategy of Three Sisters. So I've really enjoyed the game. I want to play it some more. I want to test this out and see if this is the kind of runaway strategy. If that is, then I think my score will eventually lower for the game, because every game will be trying to pull off that strategy. I don't know that that's the case yet. We both really like the game. It's very portable and it's kind of easy to take for traveling. So I think it's a game that we will be traveling with and playing with while we travel. And we do a lot of kind of smaller trips around the Los Angeles area where we'll stay overnight, for 1 night or 2 nights just to get out of the city. And that's been really good in the pandemic, just to go like camping for a night or two, just to change up the scenery while, everything that's been going on in the last couple of years has been happening. So I think this is a game that we'll continue to take with us. We'll continue to play. I'll continue to report back on it. I think if the variability is there, the 7.5 is probably a solid score. There's a solo game. I'm going to mess with that. If I really enjoy that, Three Sisters could go up to like an 8. It's possible it goes up a little bit. It's also possible, though, once I play it more and I see if that scoring situation is what I'm fearing it could be, then my score will get bumped down. But for now, it's a 7.5. We both really enjoyed our time with it, and I'm looking forward to playing it again and seeing if, what's going on with the variability of scoring and if there is maybe like an Uber strategy. But I will let you know when I do. Okay, the final game that I played this period is Under Falling Skies. I've played 5 games of it. I've already alluded to the fact that I'm not loving it. I think, now this game is only like $30. It's a retail game, and I think a lot of people are really gonna like it. So if it's for you, awesome. People are gonna love it. I know it's on a lot of top 10 lists. I think people have been rating it 8s and 9s, and there's a lot to like. When you get the game out of the box, there are 3 different cities that you can kind of defend. It's basically like Space Invaders, the game, but it's a dice drafting game. And one of the things that you're going to be doing is using dice to get this excavator to go lower and lower beneath the ground. And as you do that, you kind of open up more rooms that you can use for dice placement. Early in the game, there isn't a lot that you can do. So you're going to be doing sort of minimal actions for definitely the first turn, but even then, the first several turns may be spent really focusing on getting that excavator down, starting to go up a research track and kind of charging up your charge so that you can do other actions like firing at ships or going up the research track, or in some places creating robot dice that you can then put in other things. There's a decent amount of kind of variability to what you're doing. But I found in my plays that at least half of the game feels like you're not really doing that much. You're just planning for the future. And then at the end, you're trying to squeak out a victory. I just didn't love the kind of setup. And I also just didn't love the choices, the way the dice drafts. I think they did a lot. I think they put a lot in this game. Component-wise, it's very small. You can set it up quickly. It fits in this little box. And when it comes out of the box, when you first open it up, you've got 3 different cities. I think you've got 3 different boards that kind of fit down in like kind of the control rooms, and they're double-sided and you kind of mix and match them. So for every city, you're going to be using a different combination of those 2 boards. And then there are 4 boards that the aliens are going to be coming down on, and they are double-sided. So if you want to kind of have more difficulty in the game, you can flip over any number of those 4 boards to the other side. The idea is that if you flip none of them, you're playing on a difficult level of 0, and each board that you flip ramps up the difficulty by 1. So if you're doing all 4 hard sides, you're playing with a difficulty of 4. Now I've played up to a difficulty level of 2. I don't see myself wanting to play 4 or having much fun playing 4. But the other really cool thing about Under Falling Skies is that there's a campaign in the box, and it is set up kind of for discovery. So they warn you not to just look at all the components. There are essentially, I think, 4 different chapters. And so as you play a chapter, you're going to take the components for that chapter. Now, each chapter has 4 different cities in it, or at least the first chapter did. I've only played the first chapter. So it has 4 different cities, different from the 3 ones kind of in the top of the box. It has some more boards for the bottom. And it has a few more mechanics, and every city is going to have kind of an additional mechanic. It also has, in addition to the different cities, there are missions that have very specific goals, some of them using different kind of mechanics for that mission. And they have characters, and the characters will all have sort of a one-time use that you can activate at any point during that game. And so you're going to have 4 of each of these things in a chapter. And so you're going to randomly choose 2 of them. So 2 cities, 2 missions, and 2 characters. And once you've assembled those packages, you're going to choose 1 package. The other city basically is lost to the aliens. And then you have to play a game to try to save the city that you chose. If you fail, you can fail once, you're allowed to replay it, in which case you would flip the city to the easier side, and there'd be something that would, a more stronger ongoing player ability that will help you. So that's kind of the first game of the first chapter. Once you've finished that and you've hopefully won, you'll then do the same thing with the other 2 sets of components. You'll mix and match them, get 2 different cities, 2 different missions, and 2 different characters, and then you'll pick one of those packages, put the other one away. So you'll essentially defend 2 different cities in the first chapter. I think each successive chapter works the same way. I haven't gotten through them yet. I will be finishing my campaign, and I can report on how that played as I play it more and do more. It's possible, especially that the last chapter may be more of kind of like a big finale rather than, 2 different games. But we'll see. So I do think for players that like this, that like the dice drafting and like the kind of mechanical puzzle in this game, which a lot of people seem to do, there is a lot of variability and there is a lot of thought and cleverness and care that went into the design and the production and getting it into a small box for a budget price of $30. And I think also the way that the campaign works with you kind of assembling different missions and things and then picking one, there's a lot of variability. So there is pretty good replay in that box. And I think for that price tag, it's really good. So a lot of people are going to love it. They're going to rate it 8s and 9s. They're going to really like it. For me, though, for whatever reason, the puzzle just felt a little bit flat. I didn't like the way it's kind of more loaded into the end game, and the beginning half of any game is very preparatory. And I just didn't like some of the choices. It's not like it's any better than something like Ratcatcher, but the Ratcatcher to me it appealed to me more. The components, the theme of that game, the kinds of choices that you were making, the way that you were kind of managing things in the Ratcatcher really appealed to me. Under Falling Skies, while I could recognize that a lot of people really like it, I don't think it's my game. For now, I'm rating Under Falling Skies a 6.5. I like it a little bit better than Final Girl just because it's not as luck-based. I think the design's a little bit tighter and stronger, and if you're playing smartly, I think you're not going to be as sabotaged by bad luck in Under Falling Skies. But I didn't really enjoy it much more than like Canvas. Canvas is, while there aren't that many choices there, it's an appealing game to play. This one just fell a little bit flat for me. So 6.5 for Under Falling Skies for now. I will report back on a score once I finish the campaign. Maybe it'll go up a little bit. And then I'll think about holding Under Falling Skies to perhaps do a campaign once I eventually get the Twitch channel launched, because I think it would be a fun thing to do as a live play and as a campaign. I think it would be a lot of fun for that. And then at that point, I'll probably sell it and move on, because there are other campaign games out there. There's other solo games that I would prefer. And there's other games I think that I would want to continue showcasing on my channel, my Twitch channel, however I end up producing content for it. But I liked it. I just didn't love it. And it's not something I plan on coming back to long term. Okay, now this is the moment when I would normally be talking to you about campaigns that are running, that are funding this week. Unfortunately, there was just nothing that I really felt like getting fully behind. And kind of putting out there and saying, I think this looks really good. You should back this. And I don't want to feel obligated to do that. I want to only be showcasing games that I'm personally excited about and think are going to be really good. Now, there were 2 that were very close that I had as a question mark. I looked at them more the last couple days, and I ultimately decided not to include them. But they are Earth Under Siege Flashpoint, which is kind of a miniatures exploration dungeon crawlery game. It looks okay. It just didn't really do it for me. There was nothing that was super compelling to me about it. And I think there's also the potential for it to not be that great. So I didn't feel like it even hit a level where I could kind of recommend it to people from what I've seen. Now, I know someone who's backing it. I may eventually play it. We'll see what I think about it at that point if I do. But there are so many good kind of campaign games and dungeon crawlers and miniature games, and there are some coming out in the next couple months. Those are the games that I want to focus on. This one I didn't think was up to that level. The other game was Spring and Autumn Story of China. This one I was much closer to including. I almost did this as like the sole game, but it may not even fund. It's very, very much on the line. I think the way games normally fund, they tend to do like 2/3 of their business in the first 24 hours and about 1/3 of their business in the last 24 hours. And I think their funding goal is maybe $48,000 and they're at around 40,000. So I think that they will fund, but it's going to be a minimal fund. And I don't know if they'll end up canceling it. They've already run this campaign once before on GameFound, and it didn't pick up enough traction, and they canceled that one. Now they're running it on Kickstarter, and I don't know. I don't know if they'll cancel it and go for a third round. It's by the same people that did Hellenica, Masters of Greece, something of Greece. Hellenica, something of Greece. I forget the name of the game. But that's supposed to be a pretty good game. I haven't really seen enough great about it. And I know that this is a similar system. It's a 4X game. There are things in there that appeal to me. But the overall package, and also looking at this knowing that they're going to fund, but they're probably not going to hit a lot of stretch goals. So whatever they do end up producing and delivering is going to be probably a more spare, pared back version of a game than maybe they were hoping to produce. So I think all of those things taken into consideration, it just was not something that I wanted to actually showcase. But I did want to talk about them because they were very much on the line, and if you are looking for campaigns to go check out, you might want to check them, but they're not official entries this week. Now, I would normally talk to you about the game or games that I pledged from last week's video. And let's talk about that as well. So there were 5 games last week that I talked about that were completing their funding. There was Factory 42, Pilgrim, Tang Garden Seasons, Warp Gate Beyond, and Western Legends Big Box. So a lot of those games have their fans. Certainly, like a lot of people love Western Legends, so that was something that I felt I should include. None of them just really quite did it for me. I had some interest in Factory 42. I know things that are coming. You can't back everything, even though I back a lot of games. So I ended up not backing it. It just wasn't quite doing enough, I think, to get me to back it. But it was kind of on a line for me. Pilgrim also really kind of interested me. And I hear it does some really cool mechanical things with its Mancala mechanic. So I was very much on the line with Pilgrim as well. But I know I have stuff coming up, and we'll talk about this in future weeks, but like there's a new Sleeping Gods campaign for a standalone game. There's a new Lucky Duck kind of exploration game with a character that looks like Kurt Russell. There's Tidal Blades 2. There's this new game that just premiered called Fire for Light. What else is out there? Game Brewers doing Oak on GameFound, which I'm mildly considering. Prospero Hall is just doing their very first Kickstarter for a legacy game that is Jurassic World themed. And I may end up backing that. That looks really cool. There's another couple games that just launched today that will complete their funding in several weeks. One's called Mercurial. Another's called Kingdoms Rise and Fall Dorian. I'm not sure I'll back either one of those, but I need to investigate them more. So those are definitely questions. And then I know that there's a Kickstarter coming up for expansions for Maglev Metro, which I'll probably back. There's a Waste Knights expansion campaign, which I'll definitely back. There's a Euthia sequel campaign where you can get all the previous stuff, which I missed the first time around. And I know I'm going to be backing that. That's going to be on GameFound in about a month. And there's also a Far Cry board game I'm considering backing. So there's a lot of stuff coming that I'm very excited about. And it just kept me from backing like Pilgrim and Factory 42. 10 Garden Seasons, I also talked about last week. It's a lighter game, so it's not really kind of in my wheelhouse. It's super pretty though. But a lot of people report some issues with gameplay and just kind of seeing it visually. I talked about it last week. And the all-in price for that one was huge. It was hundreds of dollars. So I just thought for what that game was, for the kind of gameplay it was, for some of the issues with the gameplay, I just didn't want to drop that much on the all-in, and I didn't want to get anything less than that. And Warpgate Beyond just I don't think was really for me. And Western Legends Big Box, I've played that a couple times. I don't love that game. So it just, nothing was for me. The two things that might have been, I just had, was very on the fence with, and I know there are a lot of things coming that I'm not on the fence with, that I'm really excited about. So I did not back anything from the last period. Finally, I'd like to talk to you about the 4 games that I acquired since I last spoke to you. One of those was my Aeon's End Legacy pledge. And I have been kind of a little late to the party on Aeon's End. I missed the first kind of few games of theirs. So in the last several Kickstarter campaigns, I've essentially been pledging 2 games at a time. And I did that this time out as well. So I got the new Aeon's End Legacy of Gravehold campaign. And then at the same time, I picked up the original Aeon's End Legacy campaign. Now, I'm a little unsure of where to start with the Legacy versions because I've played Aeon's End before. I love it. It's one of my favorite 2-deck builders along with Thunderstone Quest. But I haven't played it at all with my fiance, and we kind of haven't cracked it open. And I own pretty much everything Aeon's End. So the question is, because you can do it both ways, do I start with the Legacy games and then go into the base games? Or do I start with the base game and then maybe kind of segue into the Legacy games chronologically as they were produced? I think that's probably what I'm going to do. Which means that like Legacy of Gravehold, that's not going to get played for a while because I have a lot of other Aeon's End Legacy content to get to, which is unfortunate. It may mean that I don't get to Legacy of Gravehold in time to include it whenever I do like a best of 2022 list. I would have to get through, like 6 boxes of Aeon's End content to get there. But it may happen because I really do like Aeon's End just in general. So if I play with my fiance and she likes it as much as I do, we could just kind of burn through it, binge it basically. But we'll see. But I acquired both of those games, Legacy and Legacy of Gravehold. I also got the AuZtralia Big Z box with the 2 new expansions, Revenge of the Old Ones and TaZmania. Now, I own AuZtralia already, so I was, I guess, early to that party. I really love it. It is by Martin Wallace, the designer of Age of Steam, Railways of the World, Brass Birmingham, Brass Lancashire. More Brass Lancashire. Brass Birmingham, I think, was other designers kind of using his design and tweaking it a little bit. But I love Martin Wallace's designs in general. He's one of my favorite designers. And AuZtralia is a very interesting combination of train building game, also mining for resources with Cthulhu. And it takes place in a post-apocalyptic Australia. There's a time track in the game. So when it gets to a certain point, the old ones will wake up and they'll start taking actions. Until that point, because it's a time track, the way a time track works is whoever is last on the time track takes actions until they bypass other players, and then whoever is then last takes actions. So basically, whoever's bringing up the rear keeps taking actions until they're no longer bringing up the rear. There's a really cool gameplay puzzle in AuZtralia where you're building these train tracks, you're getting resources, you're building up different kinds of military units that work in different ways. So there's planes that have a high range. There are kind of soldiers that can shoot. There is a certain kind of vehicle that runs on the tracks. So you can only kind of use that on the train line. And then the cards that work with those units are luck-based to some degree. So you're kind of assembling these units to create a system of cards for yourself to tweak the luck system as best you can. And for me, it really works. I don't love hugely luck-based games. but I like the way that luck is incorporated into this one, and it works for me. And I like the train building element, along with putting these forces together, fighting old ones for rewards, and not always knowing where they're going to spawn or how they're going to move. There's a very interesting system for that. So I like the game a lot. There's 2 new expansions. Revenge of the Old Ones, I think, adds in more around the coastal areas. And so it adds monsters kind of coming from the oceans, which is really cool. And then the TaZmania expansion, I believe, is sort of like a solo mode or co-op for 2 players, so 1 to 2 players. And I think there's kind of like a campaign that you can play with that. I love the game to begin with, so I'm really excited to get more AuZtralia and dive into that content and experience it. And again, if there's that solo mode, TaZmania, that's something I probably eventually will want to stream on the Twitch channel once I get it launched later in the year. The final delivery I got was Keyper at Sea, which is an expansion for Keyper. And I was very lucky that I was able to get not only the Keyper base game, but the Keyper character edition. So in Keyper, you're using all these different kinds of meeples, they're different colors and things. But if you get the Keyper character edition, they're all these customized meeples. And I just know it's going to bring the game to that next level. It's designed by Richard Breeze, who designs all the Key games. I've played Keyflower before, which is a game that I would put in with things like Everdell and Wingspan and Concordia, maybe Power Grid, but games that are just kind of in this medium range of complexity, where I think heavier gamers have enough really good, interesting, meaty choices that they're very content to play those games. Yet there is enough of a simplicity to them that you can teach lighter gamers as well. I mean, not all lighter gamers. Some gamers only want the really light games, but players who are kind of like medium light or maybe up into medium, these are just solid games that everyone can play. And Keyflower is definitely one of those games. So I like Richard Breeze's design style as well. I think the kind of graphic design in his games is very specific unto itself. It's like its own little world. It almost reminds me of how like Richard Scarry did all those kids books, and they had a very singular design to them, and they created kind of this own world. The Key games are kind of similar in that way, I guess, to me. They just have a very kind of similar design sense, and the art kind of carries over from one game to the next, and it's a very specific kind of niche. And I really like Keyflower, so I was looking to kind of branch out. And I know there's a mechanic in Keyper where you kind of have these 2 different cards and you overlay them, and it determines your actions and your resources. I've seen that in a couple other games. Smartphone is another one, and I like that mechanic. So I just felt like this is the time to get another Key game when they were doing this Kickstarter for Keyper at Sea. And once I realized that I was able to sneak in and get the character edition, originally it wasn't available. There were only 1,000 copies available, and they were sold out. And I was really on the fence about whether to back the game without it, but I decided to do it. And then I kept watching. The character edition, and somebody at some point dropped their pledge, and so they had one, and I just snapped it up. And so knowing that I kind of have the version of the game with more table presence that's going to add a little bit more to the experience, absolutely. So I'm looking forward to getting really all of these played, but I am continuing following up on the games I need to get played for 2020. Now, I'm going to talk very briefly about that before I end this video, but just kind of in terms of what's coming for the channel. I have a video series I've been working on for a while. It is my 100 most anticipated games of 2022. I'm 6 videos into that series. I'll link the first video below. I have 2 videos left to produce. I've already prepped for 1 video. I plan on shooting it tomorrow and getting it edited and posted by Thursday. And then I will be doing the Kickstarter weekly for next week. And then the final video will probably get recorded maybe over the weekend and edited and posted maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week. At that point, I should be done with that series. Check it out. I think it is a really great resource and a tool for people to look at what's coming this year, both on crowdfunding and in retail, and maybe just kind of make some make some benchmarks for yourself in terms of what you may be looking for later in this year and when it's going to be delivered or be offered at retail. So I'm very proud of that series, and it's almost done, and I'm going to be moving on now to the next thing. So the Kickstarter weeklies are still going to come out every week. In fact, I'm going to work very hard to make sure that they get published on Friday for the following week. So everyone should have plenty of time to watch them well in advance of, those campaigns that I'm talking about funding. In the past, I haven't always done so well with that. I've just been juggling too many things, but that is a goal for the future. So that will be happening. The next big series that I'm going to be doing is my top games of 2020. I'm a couple years behind on this, but I'm sort of playing catch up. But I wanted to start with 2020. So I've been putting this number up here. That is the number of games that I have left to play before I can do that. And I'm down to 12. And since I'm kind of finishing up this other video series, I anticipate that I will have these 12 games played within the next month, 2 months tops. And then I will be focusing on my top 30 games of 2020. The plan then is to do my top 30 games of 2021 at the end of this year. And then once we get into 2023, probably in the first 3 to 6 months of that year, I will do my top 30 games of 2022. And then that's what I'll do moving forward. So each year I will try to get out my top 30 games for the previous year in the first 3 to 6 months of that following year. Also, exciting things are happening behind the scenes. So I'm getting more shelving upstairs. I already have a lot of shelving upstairs and a lot of games, but there's so much overflow. I'm working on getting more shelving upstairs and kind of finishing my upstairs studio, better lighting, more equipment, more cameras. And now once I get that space set up, I probably will then produce my top 30 games of 2020. But I think I'm going to be doing some behind the scenes work so that by the time I get to those videos, they're going to look a lot better. Also around that time, I'm going to be launching a Patreon where people can start to support me. And then in the middle of the year, between the top 30 games of 2020 and the top 30 games of 2021, I'm going to do my top 300 games of all time. And I'm going to be joined by my friend Ryan Everly for maybe the top 50 games, and he will give you his top 50 games along with mine. So that's going to be a huge thing that I'm going to do in the summer. Before I get to that, I definitely want to have the upstairs space finished, all that lighting, new cameras and stuff. Now, the last big thing I'm planning on doing by the end of the year is starting a Twitch channel and starting to stream games. And that is going to be its own project because I'm going to need certain kinds of equipment for that, like Stream Deck and multiple cameras, and kind of figuring out what's working. But my goal is to eventually do a lot of streaming on Twitch. So that is a lot of what's coming later in the year. I even have some more plans beyond that, but I'm not going to kind of go into those yet. I'll talk about those as the year goes on. But just know, over the course of the next year, you're going to get a top 30 games list for 2020, 2021, and 2022. You're going to get a top 300 games of all time. The Kickstarter weekly videos will continue. I'm probably going to be sneaking in some teach and review videos in there as well. And I'm working towards getting that Twitch channel going and the Patreon. And once the Patreon is up, I'm going to be interacting with people and using some of your feedback to determine how I handle content in the future and kind of what things that I do. I'm only one person, so I don't have time to do everything. So it's going to be very much kind of a pick and choose sort of a thing. I have a lot of things that I want to do, and I'm going to use your feedback once we get to the Patreon to determine kind of what roads I start to walk down. Very excited about all the choices. I hope you guys will continue watching my content and supporting me as this channel continues to grow and just has a lot more games featured and profiled and all kinds of cool content, and I expand it over the next year or two. So there's a lot of really cool growth ahead that I'm very excited for, and I hope if you're following me now and you're liking what I'm doing, you'll continue with me and we'll grow this thing into something very, very cool. That's going to be a little different from other channels out there in the way that I approach it, but hopefully as successful over time, and something that I think gamers versus publishers are really going to appreciate, because everything that I'm doing is being done very much in mind with gamers rather than approaching it from kind of a publisher angle and courting the publishers. But that means that I'm going to need to do things in a certain kind of way, and hopefully it will be successful. We'll find out together. But I am very much all in and focused on this for years to come at this point. So take this ride. It's going to be a blast, I think. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm trying to figure out what I should be kind of saying, maybe in closing to my videos. I really like what the Undead Viking says about being the best you, because I think that's something that we all need to remind ourselves of and focus on. And I think, when the Undead Viking says that, he's kind of echoing Bill and Ted, which, sure, I espouse that as well. So I'm trying to figure out a way to say that feels a little more original coming from me. But really, I just want everybody out there to have a good time as human beings, not have to deal with so much of the chaos in the world. Games, I think, can help us through that in different ways, both in socialization and helping us to meet other people that can enrich our lives, and also helping us develop ways to think about problems and approach things, whether it's in a game or in real life. So I think there are a lot of really great reasons to play games, and they're fun above all else. And I think they can be a great uniter. So this is a hobby and something that I love and I'm very excited about, and I'm very excited about what it can do in the world and for people as individuals. And I hope you see that too. And I hope that my journey in this hobby and doing what I'm doing can be a positive one. And I hope that your journey can be a positive one as well. And I just want us to help keep things positive for each other and everyone else as much as possible. Gaming still takes place in the real world. There's negative things happening in the real world. So if we want this to be a hobby that is an escape or can be an escape, we also need to help other people escape and find ways to make this hobby appeal to as broad a group of people as possible, and maybe even use some of those board game connections and solutions to put a little sunlight out in the world and help change the world as well. Have a great week. I know I'm going to be playing some really fun games. I will be back with another Kickstarter Weekly very soon. That one will probably focus a lot more on upcoming campaigns and not so much on games I'm playing. Over the next week, while I'm doing all of these other videos, I'm going to be working on finishing our campaign for Role Player Adventures. We have 4 scenarios left. I'm super excited to be finishing that. So I'll be playing that this week. I'm also getting together with a friend of mine on Sunday to play 2 more scenarios in Descent Legends of the Dark. I'm having a really good time with that game. So I've got a fun week planned out, lined up game-wise. I hope you do too. I'll see you on the flip side. Look for video 7 in my most anticipated games of 2022 in the next few days. And then like a day or 2 after that, the next Kickstarter Weekly. And then a couple days after that, that final video in the most anticipated games of 2022. Thanks for watching, take care, and I will see you very soon.